Sabermetrics Network. So we're a couple of weeks into UFA season, and I've put together a fantastic panel of the sharpest minds in Calgary of statistical analysis.
Don't oversell.
Yeah.
Everyone remembers Justin Azevedo from last week of Matchsticks and Gasoline and Flames Nation. And this week we're lucky to be joined by Marty Clarke of Jets Nation. You might know him as MC Hockey, but not MC Hockey 79. That's a different dude. And then at the end, of course, we have Kent Wilson, who's the managing editor of Nations Network, among many other things. And gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today.
So.
Well, let's turn on to a more positive note then. The best signings. And Justin, you saw that my man, Jeff Halpern, was signed.
I did. We talked
for
about this. Right.
Only 1 year. So that makes you happy. There's no risk. And I'm happy because it was barely over league minimum. It was $800,000. That's just a touch more than your pick, which was the Mikhail Backlund contract, right? And of course, don't get me wrong, I think I'd rather have Mikhail Backlund than Jeff Halpern. But the fact of the matter is, you can get a guy like Jeff Halpern who wins faceoffs, plays the tough minutes for $800,000 for 1 year. That's risk-free. If I'm wrong, it's 1 year. And it's barely more than what you would pay for an NHL player. Yeah. So, what do you guys think? I mean, Backlund and Halpern aside, what do you guys see as some of the best contracts, Kent?
You're gonna have to come back to me. I'm trying to think of the best contract off the top of my head. It's just been such a relatively slow season this year.
Yeah.
There's a couple signings the first couple days, and now I've been in prospect mode for about 2 weeks. So I'm just trying to come back to who has been signed and who hasn't.
Well, maybe you
got a
can
list
have your
for you.
sheets.
You can look at my cheat sheet while I
there you
go from there.
Well,
I was going to say I thought the Kyle Wellwood was a very good signing for the Jets because
1.6 million,
Well,
1.6, 1.7
for 1 year.
I did a
So Justin's happy is 1 year.
absolutely.
You're happy is 1.6.
Yeah, I mean on JetsNation.ca I did a little analysis of. It was originally 36, went down to 33 free agents who were UFAs and under. I think for four was under 32, and he was at the top of the list in terms of advanced statistics. And so I did my own little calculation using little percentages and assigning them to different types of statistics, mainly advanced statistics, and he came out right on the top. So I think that ex-Maple Leaf, ex-out-of-shape guy really worked against him. And the Jets were lucky to get him last year, and then to get him back for under $2 million, I think is a really good value, because I think he can give you that 45, 47 points. He might play with ex-Flame Olli Jokinen, and that might be a good thing, depending how Jokinen performs. But I think no matter what line you put him on in 1, 2, or even 3, he's going to generate possession. That's what he does. He's very good at it, and he's obviously in better shape, and probably a more well-rounded hockey player and individual.
I was going to say, maybe rounded isn't the right term.
There you go.
In fact, the joke was when he was first signed that he was signed to basically keep Buffalo away from the buffet table.
Yes. Well, there's another guy where that team, there's one other guy I worry about. Fantastic player, but I think he had injuries, and talk about Buffalo now, and getting into November, he finally sort of got better, in good shape, and got past his injuries, and then his performance improved. But that's a risk. I mean, you know, that's part of being a professional. You got to be in shape. You're a hockey player. You're a professional hockey player. So I think Wellwood's learned. You hope someone on that same team, talking about Buffalo, learns the lesson too. But I digress.
Well, while Kent's trying to find someone, Justin, isn't Wellwood one of those guys, though, that needs to have the offensive zone minutes?
Actually, you know what? Maybe not as much as you think.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely, obviously everybody does better a little bit.
He's not going to be a shutdown guy ever.
Exactly. But he's not somebody you have to completely shelter either. He's a guy that's going to put, like, if you give him relatively even circumstances, he's going to generate shots for you, and more shots than he's having against him. But yes, like as Ken says, you're never going to have him in a shutdown role just because that's not the type of player he is. He's a guy that you can put out there for 50 or 51, 49 starts.
Power play unit.
And he'll put 35 to 40 points up, and he'll have relatively good advanced stats.
So a useful depth player.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there's a lot of depth players that aren't useful at all.
Exactly.
So, they kick around the league for years.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of good signings, we've actually talked about a few of them. So Wellwood was one of them, and Garrison was another one. But in terms of just price and age and risk, I really like the Lars Eller signing. The guy's been trending upwards for a few years now. I think 2 years and 1.3 per year. So much like Jeff Petrie last year, I think Eller just kind of has these arrows pointing in the right direction. When we watched Petrie for the Edmonton Oilers, become like a legitimate top 4 defenseman who's probably going to be a top pairing defenseman eventually in his career.
Yeah.
A guy like Eller has those same types of arrows in terms of possession, in terms of the competition he faces, and what types of leagues and competition he's played as he's developed his game.
He's Montreal's Backlund.
Essentially, yes,
Yeah.
but scoring a little bit more.
He scored
Yeah,
a
exactly.
better luck,
A
too.
little better player, I'd say, overall.
So I really like that contract, and I also like the Wojtek Wolski contract. Not
Yeah.
necessarily just because it's very
It's very,
very
cheap
low
and
risk.
very short. Yeah.
and we know it, when he was
When he was good, he was really good.
he was good in, he was good in all metrics. It wasn't just the goals.
No,
it
he
wasn't
was good
just
across the board.
Exactly. He generated shots. He was able to play relatively tough minutes, and this
Yeah.
was only like a
Just
year and
fell
a
off
half.
the cliff.
Exactly.
2 years ago.
Nobody knows what happened, right?
Yeah.
He just stopped being that for whatever reason. So, and especially in a team like the Caps, you can a team that much of an offensive powerhouse. You can have that type of you can have those types of risks on that team.
Yeah. Speaking of risk, what about Peter Mueller? What do people think about that one? Be kind of interesting. I thought for 1.725, not a bad signing, but again, concussions. Like, how do you know that a guy's not going to have another one on the first play of the first shift, first game?
So I approach that 2 ways. So the thing, you look at it as just an injury, not even necessarily talking about, it's concussion. No, it's just an injury. Anybody can get hurt at any time. So saying that, you shouldn't sign this guy because he looks like he could get hurt, is kind of ridiculous to me, because any player can get hurt. The concussion thing, though, kind of brings that. We've heard for years and years and years, the more concussions you get, the easier it is, right? Exactly, and just how devastating concussion can be to a career, and even to post-career, eventually gets to a point where just you know what?
On the flip side, though, one of the money puck principles is if you can find a guy that's coming off an injury, but he's healthy, he can often be undervalued to get him for real cheap.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if I'd classify that as real cheap for Peter Mueller. I was impressed with him. He was as a teenage rookie, he scored 50 points, over 50 points, and that puts him actually in fairly elite company. There's not a lot of guys that have done that, and the list of people that have done that are some big names.
Right.
So I always saw him as a guy with upside, but if a guy hasn't realized it by age 23, 24, I usually start to worry, because that's generally when guys stop improving, or at least at the exponential rate.
Yeah.
Right?
And I believe that's what he is right now.
He's 24 years old.
Yeah.
So developmentally, though, how much do you think of an impact injury has on that? Do you think? So I guess what I'm asking is, do you think that players, because if they're hurt at age 23, do they miss the potential development at age 23, or do they just kind of push that development back 1 year?
So
I guess that's kind of the risk you're taking, is that if you're seeing a guy that's been injured for 100 of the past 160 games, is he going to take that potential development time and actually use that to his advantage this year, or is that just lost forever?
Gone,
Right.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting conundrum.
You're
Especially
right.
things like that.
You're right, it's a different equation when it's an established player.
Mhm.
But like Christian Huselius, another guy who's been injured for the last couple of years,
Yeah.
people see him as fragile. They forget that for his entire career prior to that, he never missed more than a couple games a year. Yeah. So if he's healthy, I don't know, I'm not his doctor, but if he is healthy, he could potentially be an impact player again, despite being, 33, 34?
33, yeah.
33,
at this
yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Also, he looks like an alien, which is definitely a positive to him in my book.
It helps
thought it
to
was
scare away the defenseman, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
And also on my copy of, I think it was NHL 08 or something, the announcer, when they said his name, it sounded like Christian Useless.
Yeah.
I was kind of kick out of that,
They called him Hula Julius, I think, once in Detroit, because he scored a point, and the PA guy, Christian, he paused and then spat out this word salad. I was like, what did he say? Kind of go on it a couple times.
There you go.
Who'd you come up with, Ken?
What did PA Parenteau sign for?
Oh, in Colorado.
Colorado, right?
I think it was 4 even, but I can't. Don't quote me on
But it wasn't for very long, was it? A couple of
it.
years?
See, I thought it was for 4 years. I thought it was a 4-year, $16 million.
That's not terrible. The issue, the risk with him is he was playing with really good players.
Mhm.
In
Absolutely.
Yeah.
he tore up the AHL for a few years. I don't know why he was there for so long. He got
Islanders, that would do.
he got to New York, and he's had 2 pretty good seasons. Now we don't know really if it's. I haven't done a wowie on him yet, so I don't know if it was him or if it was him and Tavares, if he was contributing to that or not, or just riding the coattails. So I think they're going to find out in Colorado this year. It's not a terrible risk to take though.
No.
Well, if it's 4 years, then it would be.
It's 4 years and $4 million, according to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that's a risk. But you're right. He is standing on on a mountain of AHL data, which some people tend to just ignore, but the AHL data has actually proven to be very reliable in predicting NHL success.
That's a pretty good league, and and he dominated it for a while.
Yeah.
So maybe he just didn't have the opportunity up until recently to play in the league and play in a scoring role. So
I'm always surprised by guys that kill the AHL and don't get a shot in the NHL. A lot of times they're little guys, but sometimes they're a guy like Alexandre Giroux, who just lit up the AHL, and he broke Brett Hull's AHL record. I mean, just amazing player.
And he's a big guy too.
Yeah, he's 6'3", and now he's signed over in the KHL for next year. He's given up on the NHL at age 33. And I don't blame him. I mean, he's played on 6 different teams, never got a shot. And I've only seen him play a couple of times. I couldn't see the obvious flaw. You'd think some guy would throw $700,000 at him and give him a shot, but
yeah, he got call-ups every so often. Yeah. I think his one flaw was he wasn't a great skater, but there's been lots of not great skaters score in the NHL, so I don't know.
Well, the Oilers game, what, a 10-game shot last year when they started him out at the beginning of the year? After they had signed him off Washington?
Yeah, he hasn't even played 50 NHL games and he's in his 30s, so I don't know if he got 10 games out of them.
Yeah.
Maybe he did.
Yeah, it was not very
Couldn't have been much more than that.
But he didn't score, he scored like 3 points or something, so I mean, there you go.
That's the issue. I think there's 2 main issues with guys like that. The first is that there's the sample size problem. Is that you have this large sample size in the AHL, and then when they come into the NHL, people always expect
they don't start
right away.
They don't start scoring right away.
Especially
guys in AHL, right?
Especially with goalies. I mean, goalies have got to have a great first year. If they do, like Steve Mason, they can ride it for a while.
Yeah.
But if they have a really bad first year, they're just put right back down again, even though they've
And
got
here's the opposite of Giroux. David Moss comes in, scores like 3 goals in his first 5 games, and they keep him up because, hey, look at this guy has potential. And then he developed his other talents. He's gritty. He's he can do other things.
Possession.
He does drive possession really well.
It's possible.
Actually a pretty good signing there.
If Moss never scored those 3 goals,
he would
maybe he's an AHL in life.
Yeah,
it's entirely possible.
Good point.
Yeah.
I think he was a pretty poor skater when he first came up, but improved on it.
Yeah, he was just okay.
Just okay and not fast.
Yeah. Honestly, I think things like that are just a market inefficiency that haven't been explored to their fullest potential yet. And eventually somebody will, and they'll realize, oh hey, this guy got 100 points in the AHL. He's probably good enough to be playing 3rd-line minutes. Give us 25 to 30 points a game.
Well, and especially in a league that dresses guys like Darcy Hordachuk.
Yeah, it's like what?
Why wouldn't you give a guy who scored 100 points in the AHL?
Like this is
a roster spot.
And this is something that Steinberg always loves to bring up, is that whenever he's talking to somebody, he's like, oh yeah, I use Colton Gillies as my baseline level. Could you beat Colton Gillies? How is Colton Gillies in the NHL and you're not? It's like it's like okay, well, you know what? That guy's not really that good at hockey.
Or P3L, or
it's
Brandis Lavinens for the Flames.
Well, don't start me with the goons. But every now and then I am researching a player. Most recently was Rod Pelly, who played for the Devils and went to the Ducks. And look at him. I'm just studying his stat sheets, trying to find how this guy has 4 NHL seasons, just looking for something. And sure enough, I won't find a stat, but I'll find a lot of people saying that he's a really hard worker, a really hard worker. In Calgary, the example would be Tim Jackman, a really hard worker. Or Tom Kostopoulos, non-Stopoulos, right?
And I like to harp on this a lot, is that when you use descriptors like, oh, you got heart and grit, it's mostly you're just using that in place of things that are actually more tangible.
It doesn't produce
successful for
he's big and he makes the odd body check.
You say somebody's gritty because he doesn't really score. He doesn't really help the team in any other way. He's just
there's some guys that when I studied, I find it. Like Scotty Nichol, who I think also was a Flame years ago. Now he's very far into his career. And I look at him, and at the surface, his stats don't look good. No, but once you go deep, you find the guy throws hits, he draws penalties.
And a really good face-off.
Amazing face-off guy. So Scotty Nichol, I'd gladly, another Jeff Halpern. Doesn't play the tough minutes, but he does win face-offs and draw penalties.
Yeah, he's a competent 4th liner. Something to the table.
Yeah, something. And he is a very hard worker. People say he's a very hard worker, and he is, and he has those elements to it.
That brings you back one more before we move on to the signing of Wayne Primo when the Flames had him. And they re-signed him for, I think it was $1.4 million for a couple of years. And I said, what are you doing? And Daryl Sutter was interviewed about it, and he said something stupid like, well, 6'4" centers don't grow on trees. It's like, it's such a stupid rationale for signing.
Like, oh, that guy's tall, let's sign.
Like, he's big and he's a center, but he's not very good. And if you looked at his entire career, it was just replacement level player at best. And they signed him for 2 or 3 times the amount that a replacement, and eventually they had to give up a second-round pick just to get rid of him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just stupid stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's like, don't look at the tools or the intangibles. What results does the guy produce?
Absolutely. It doesn't matter how he gets it. What are the results? Yeah.
That entire trade was just kind of weird because I think the Flames got back a second-round pick, Wayne Primo, and Anton
They got like a
Stralman.
7th-round pick back. Or
Oh yeah,
fifth.
oh
Like,
yeah,
they
it was
gave out
seventh.
that.
Yeah, sorry, it's 7th. But yeah, like so, you have Anton Stralman who's there for training camp and then is gone.
And then they trade him for.
This is another
Magic
money
Kings.
puck type guy.
Yeah, totally.
He's Anton. He was the first Anton Patrick.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, then he goes to Columbus last year or 2
Yeah,
years
it
ago or
was-
whatever.
yeah, and then they gave up on him because he had a bad plus-minus.
Right.
Yeah,
And then
but
the
he's
Rangers-
still
The
goes-
Rangers signed him for his song, and he was good for them.
Yeah.
He wasn't great, but for cheap.
Yeah.
Like I think he was making like 725K. It's like,
Yeah.
and he was playing
Yeah.
4 or 5 minutes. Like that's like, sorry, like number 4, number 5 minutes, not 4 or
Right.
5 minutes a game.
Right.
But
In that vein, let me throw one player name at you. It's one of my little pet cases when I was picking through all the second lines in the league, looking for guys that could play on the first line. Because I noticed last year, a lot of cases, the top pairing was a great player like Peter Angelo or Bo Meester or something like that.
And some guy.
Yeah, and some guy who was more of a second, third liner, but he just did a good job, and that's what all people do with their top pairings. And so I was looking, because we all know there are not a lot of top-line defensemen available, so I really went hunting through the second lines to see, to find someone, maybe a money puck player. And one of the guys that seemed to look pretty good, albeit in a small sample size, was the New York Islanders' Dylan Reese.
Yep.
He was a second-line
I saw that
defenseman,
too.
but his numbers were quite good. And if you have good numbers on a team like the Islanders, there's got to be something there.
Exactly. So that's a guy where you say, are these advanced statistics helping us here? And is his sample size of how many games do you remember he played?
It wasn't much.
Yeah.
I think it was 27, but it
Yeah.
must have been more than that.
Is it
That's absurd, I
significant?
guess.
So that's
Yeah.
1/3 of the season right there.
Yeah.
So, but is that a guy you sign for 600 in the NHL plus 100 in the AHL, and you call him up if you need him, and maybe 3 injuries on the defensive line, he plays defenseman number 6, and you learn something about
well,
him.
maybe not even that. Maybe you just sign him for that low, and then you come into training camp, and then you realize, hey, this guy's like the 4th defenseman on our team, 4th best defenseman on our team, and you
Yeah.
have a very valuable contract.
Yeah, like a Smyth,
Exactly.
or Smyth maybe not as good, but Derek Smyth, surprised us by playing so much for the Flames last year.
And see, those types of contracts are very valuable for 2 reasons. First is that because they're not taking up a lot of risk with cap room, term-wise, but also because they're attractive to teams at the trade deadline as well. So if you see a guy, oh hey, this guy's
Convert
playing,
him into an asset.
exactly, this guy's playing 4th line minutes for the Flames, and he's only signed till the end of this year. We need a 4th defenseman. Oh hey, here's
It's a
this.
second-round pick for him.
Exactly, and then
Yeah.
you can generate assets from those types of contracts, right?
Yeah.
So
If you have the balls to trade him at the
but
trade.
Yeah.
later,
Which the Flames haven't had.
if you're going for it, then you keep him.
Right, going
Yes,
for it.
we're going for it.
Whatever it is at this point in Calgary.
So final thoughts, any great free agents that you think are still available that you're curious about, maybe Alexander Salmon or something like that?
Salmon is easily the best player.
Yeah,
Yes.
that doesn't have to be spoken of, I think, in this company, but 7 is by far.
Who else is out there that you have your eye on?
Marty Turco, just because he has a good first name.
Marty
Amusing
Turco.
drunk stories.
Marty Turco is looking for worko.
Yes, and he will be going to Europo pretty soon.
It's terrible.
I like Shane Doan. I don't like him for the amount that's sort of being kicked around in
Yeah.
$7
which are
million,
absolutely
ridiculous.
Yeah.
ridiculous. But and he's over 35. But we don't know if the new CBA is going to keep the over 35 sort of rule. It wouldn't surprise me if it does. So he's a risk there, but pretty good player, can play second line for you.
Yeah, I like the
50, 60.
I like the comparable, like the historical comparable when you match players' stats. One of the more intriguing ones with Shane Doan was Ryan Smyth. That's one of the players that, his career, the stats have really matched closely. And of course, Ryan Smith's only like 1 or 2 years further down the track
Yeah, he
than
is,
Doan.
yeah.
I found that a very intriguing one. And of course, Smith signed for what?
2 years.
2.25, I think it was.
That's one
Contract
of the
for 2
better
years.
contracts.
Yeah.
I hate
That's
to
a
say.
good contract, yeah.
Especially because he was still playing tough minutes last year. I mean, he didn't do as well as he did the year before in LA, but
Yeah.
he was
That's-
adequate, which
Hey.
is something which is more than
Yeah.
good on the
Also,
Oilers.
yeah.
So-
If the Flames needed some grit, they could have gone after him as well. He might have, because he's an Alberta boy from Banff, he might have come down and played for Calgary. There was rumors a few years ago that we were going to trade with LA to get him, and
Yeah, but that's when he was expensive. Now that he's affordable. They've lost.
We don't want it. We don't want it now.
What do you mean you're not costing $6 million? Get the hell out of here.
Anybody else? That's a good one. Shing Don, Alexander Simmons. Anyone else to get your eyes on?
Well, we mentioned Azevedo, but I think he's a very serviceable
He is.
top
Yeah.
four guy.
I think he played the second or third hardest minutes for
Yeah.
St. Louis
Or-
last year, which is.
In terms of quality competition, I'm pretty sure he was number one.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Out of that team.
But as you say, he probably played without
Petrangelo, which
who was
obviously
already
brings
a
up-
stud in the league. So.
He's basically St. Louis's Chris Butler, but not as
It
bad.
means Koliak.
Yeah, Koliakov, obviously not Petrangelo. Jeez, that would be a horrible comparison.
Yeah.
Or somewhere between him and, say, Ian White, who was carried by Nichols.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, those are probably the big three at this point, I think.
Excellent.
If you're
Especially
looking,
now that Nicholas Hagman is signed in the KHL.
Yeah.
Rest of the league.
Yeah, a lot of guys going to gay.
If a piece of enough deal goes down the tubes.
we'll eventually we'll have
Should
to
we have
talk
another
about
meeting about that?
that.
Well, we already have our topic for next week's podcast. As for this one, thanks for watching, and I'd like to thank my guests, Justin Azevedo, Marty Clarke, and Kent Wilson. If you have any questions for any of them, you can find them on their respective websites, Matchsticks and Gasoline, Jets Nation, and Flames Nation. And of course, you can reach me, Vollman at hockeyabstract.com. Catch you next time. Thanks a lot.
All right.
And then we just look like we're talking for a minute.
Wrestle some papers.
That's right.
All right.